Welcome back to Walk-Ins. Welcome. My name is Nick Ward. I've got Michael Ray with me. We have a special guest, Sabrina Runbeck, with us today. This is an urgent care podcast all about helping medical practices and urgent cares triple their revenue through digital marketing services, exceptional patient experience, and now exceptional time management and energy level.
Like you're making money, but you got to bring some back to you, right? Like kind of relax a little bit. And Sabrina's going to help us understand that.
Right. Let me do a quick intro of our guest today. So after overcoming burnout, working in surgery, Sabrina Runbeck went back to her roots in neuroscience and public health, helping healthcare practices owners and their teams to develop mental immunity, which is so cool to me, so they can do less, achieve more, and enjoy more out of their life. Sabrina's clients have stopped working on these endless to-do lists, constantly putting out fires, and now they're able to steadily move their practices forward. So if you are a practice owner and you want to gain back 10 hours a week and increase your team's productivity, you're on the right podcast today. She is a consultant and a recovering clinician. More importantly to me also, she's a podcaster, a fellow podcaster. She just relaunched her podcast on its 100th episode called The Provider's Edge. Sabrina, welcome to the podcast today.
Hello. Thank you, Nick and Michael, for having me. And thanks everyone for picking us to enjoy your next 20, 30 minutes.
I love it. So in true fashion, whenever we bring on a guest onto the podcast, we have to ask our favorite question. What is one thing about you that nobody else knows?
Oh, nobody else knows. Well, I think, let's see. I think I'm so open out there that a lot of things people do know. And then one thing that I guess I haven't talked that much is that with all my past relationship, most of them I am still friends with my ex.
Oh, wow.
That's rare.
That's pretty good.
That is rare. So there's some secret tips on another episode of like a lifestyle podcast where how to break up and remain friends. That's going to be our next one.
The entire series.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
I gotta love it.
That's funny.
All right, Sabrina. So I mean, we gave a pretty good intro, of course, on what's going on in your world, but kind of give us a little bit of a story. How did you get here? Like, what was the turning points for you?
Yeah, great question. I think most people have some kind of turning point in their life, and then they're just like a bling, 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 right? For me, it's that I'm such a busy bee as I growing up, only child, only girl in the family, Asians, all my cousins are boys. So naturally the competitiveness is there because the family wise is that, get a good grade, be smart, have a job, marry off. When do you have kids? And then me thinking, heck no. That is not my ideal life. And then I think that's the one biggest question I even talk to all my clients and my friends about is that, what does that mean for me to have my ideal life mission, career mission, and lifestyle all mingled together? That's the same, not separate entities, and I have an excuse for everything. Now, back then, it's just my family are so much into you have to have a higher education and everyone is like masters, PhDs, whatnot. So I'm like, fine, I'll get the most amount of degrees in the family. So 2 bachelors, 2 masters later, got into medicine. And I'm like, yay. And at the time, nothing really interests me but heart surgery. So when I came out, I'm also one of those who, before I got my medical degree in PA, I had 4 job offers: neurosurgery, surgical oncology, intensive care, cardiac surgery, vascular surgery. So guess what? I just stay in surgery, right? What I didn't realize is that when you actually got yourself into those high intense hospital where it's world well known because there are patients fly in to us, some of them even have their own translator, right? Their whole personal care team. And you feel the sense of like, wow, this is exciting, right? You're doing some big, amazing work. But that also come to when my partner or supervising physician is not there. I'm working 30 days straight. I'm taking calls every day, weekday nights, and you don't stop. And you have no excuse to stop because the admin team is putting on you, right? And then also ourselves feeling like, I can't stop. If I stop, who the heck is gonna do my job, right? And then if I ask someone else to do it, they're not gonna do it as fast as me, or they might not get to the result as what I wanted. So all of those are actually just lies our brain created, right? It's not us. It's just that fear-based of us, of both from the system issue of how we treat medicine and also ourselves. We're putting ourselves into such a high standard. It's harder to even give ourselves that reality check. So to the point, I remember one morning, it's hardly 8 o'clock, and I just feel so drained. And I was still scrubbed in, my hands inside a patient's chest, just staring at my patient, going for it.
I don't think I've heard that.
And well, I'm like, in the back. And then people's like, oh, yeah, Sabrina's not talking. Usually we're the one who's like, oh yeah, play music, right? Get into the mood, like get going. I was just like, nope, let's just finish this, right? As soon as possible. And they were taking pity on me and just putting cough drop and Dayquil under my mask. And the next day I just really couldn't do it. And then I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, it seems like neck sweat all night long. I guess I have to tell myself to take a day off. Now, I know there are cases still going, but we have the contingency of having additional first assist that they can call. However, it's still a burden, right? And then the time of you feel like, oh, shoot, you have to burden someone else to do this. And at the same time, when I have to call out sick, my manager was like, oh, you didn't thought to tell us sooner? Like, oh, okay, great. Yeah, we can all plan our sick days just like our patients, right? But it's that time where I start thinking, wow, is this the way that I want to live? Is that the way that I wanted to serve? Is that who I am now? Right? Like it's just doing and going and then don't know when to stop and how to stop, or even like how to deal with myself and other people. So then I start taking a step back and went back to my root in neuroscience and public health before I got into medicine, where my thesis from more than 10 years ago were on self-care, self-management, stress management, and self-efficacy. Then you're thinking, how the heck did we forget all of that, right? Like
all of the things that you were trained on have gone.
Right, gone, right? Like, so everything is about situational. And then do we just made an excuse of, oh no, this is acceptable because that's what everybody else does, right? If you're the first one to leave, you're the weak one, right? Is that really quote unquote weak? Where we just actually don't know how to manage our time and then see what's most important and then take on way too much. That's actually what my clients call that. It's just like, oh, 80% of the drivefulness. And then, yeah. And that's why we lose freedom, right? Like we lose a sense of who we are, our identity. And then we start losing the reason why we even got into the field from the first place. So I start getting more of individual training and looking into performance sciences to see how can we get to a better place. From all the people who are executives, athletes, entrepreneurs, and other people in medicine, how come they function pretty well, right? People are able to get to both the career success and lifestyle. How are we doing in the least amount of time and effort getting the biggest result? And that's how I created my 6 core foundation, and then working through both myself and with my clients in private practice, because I use these models in larger organization, changing the team, the culture, operation. But we know, right, the larger systems always have red tags, tapes all around. You go through multiple hoops, weekly meetings, and then 6 months to a year later before something happens. Oh, yeah. Versus private practice, they see it. They have that entrepreneurial spirit and they understand everything you don't do, everything you do have a significant impact both on their team and on how people our patients perceive and their satisfaction.
So Sabrina, let me back up just a hair because you just dropped all kinds of knowledge on us. But one of the things that you were talking about early on is what the cycle starts with: a high purpose, a high need, like you're really making a difference. And then this fear-based delegation sets in. Like, I'm afraid you're not going to do it the way I would do it, or as good as I would do it, or whatever. And then from there, it's, am I burdening my team? I've gotten to the place where I'm okay to delegate, but am I putting this off on them and I'm causing damage to their workflow? And then next thing you know, you're stuck in a burnout.
Mm-hmm.
Does
Yeah,
that pretty
yeah,
close?
that is so right. And I think 2 weeks ago I had a hour-long conversation with a nephrologist who has a really big team locally. And the same thing happens also because we have generational differences, right? The perspective, the way that we talk, the way it's acceptable, not acceptable. He was having a lot of issue with his new docs because he's thinking, you know, they come out, residents become a doctor, they are a doctor, but do you know what they do to me? I try to talk to them, they're on their phone, scrolling. And then I said, all right, so in psychological terms, we call that fobbing. Well, I don't care what your kids call that. It's disrespectful. I'm like, I understand to you, the action of fobbing is disrespect, but without us categorize this behavior, people can't study it, can't call it out. If you don't know how to call out a behavior, then we won't recognize what we don't recognize. Sometimes it's so subconscious, right? You're simultaneously trying to communicate, trying to do things while you're doing everything else. That just, of course, not possible.
Man.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before. The next thing we do whenever we get off of this call is I'm going straight to YouTube and I'm like, what is fobbing? I need to know.
That's awesome. So Sabrina, what you do, what you in the past with the heart related stuff, so that's, I have a personal story tied to that time. So a lot of respect for the work that you've done. So my wife has tricuspid atresia, and she had the Fontaine procedure when she was a kid. And so like she has to see a cardiologist every single year and a liver specialist and everything. But, you know, Grant, that work that was done when she was a kid means that she's alive today. So like there is a lot of pressure there. You know, like you are changing people's lives or saving their lives in a lot of different ways. So it is hard. It's like, I need to take care of this person, but then if I don't take care of myself, how can I take care of that person anyway?
That cycle.
Yeah, because when your hands are in somebody's body and you're like having a moment, like that's not good.
Somebody's putting NyQuil up your mask.
And then you'll be surprised that we all done it, right? Like even might not be as severe as surgery, but if you think about walking around, people who don't feel well, right? No matter what type of specialty or type of career that you have, you feel like, oh, it'll go away, right? I even remember one of my patients who's like early 30s. And then, so I believe when you see people getting sick in your age group, then it hits home, right? And I remember going in, just like consult comes in, right? We typically review the patient's chart and see what's going on. I'm like, oh, this guy's young, right? Like he already had 3 open heart surgery and walks in, 2 kids on the floor. Wife is at bedside. He's wearing an oxygen mask and hunched over. And of course, they're nervous wreck, and they start losing the trust in the healthcare system already because he keep needing redos because he had an infection in his mitral valve. And initially, they just thought it's a cough and cold, then start just going to the ER, didn't detect until like second, third visit, and then full blown infection. And then the disease was so bad that he keep needing to have redo surgery because it was breaking down his valve so bad, right? And then that's one of the patients who I saw every day for a whole month because he was that sick, but to the point that he was able to go home and resume work. That's amazing, right? But you also know any age, any point of your life, this thing can happen, not because who you are, right? Many doctors, even I believe there's a Hawkins study shown 60% of primary care physicians are actually overweight or obese. And they found a correlation between that and patient satisfaction decrease and trust in healthcare provider because the patient believes when their providers are overweight or obese, they're not actually getting advices on better healthy diet, exercise, those additional healthy living way, like what do we call them, lifestyle medicine.
Yeah, it's like they're not practicing what they're preaching essentially. So it's hard to believe somebody when they're not actually doing it. So I get that. Like it's kind of like, why would you go have a workout trainer that's hasn't worked out or doesn't look like they've worked out in the gym ever.
Sabrina, I've got 3 boys. My oldest is 14. When he was a baby, we had to find a pediatrician, and we had the coolest pediatrician, but he always smelled like a cigarette. Always. He called our kids booger heads, and he was like the greatest guy. But I'm telling you, as much as I loved him, I didn't want my son around him because he smelled like a bar. And the credibility gone. I don't care if you smoke. I'm not here to judge that. What I'm saying though is, like, if we know what we know, why are you doing that?
Right.
You know,
and that's a big thing about our self-identity, is the incongruency of our behavior and what we are speaking and approaching, right? Like what we're hoping people to do, the big idea, but our own behavior. So the separation of those two can make us feel less confident. And
Right.
that part of us, right, hurts our identity of who we are. And therefore, of course, your judgment come into play. The big issue when we think about productivity efficiency is about decision fatigue. No matter what, right? These our offices, our team, phone calls endless. Whether you pick up yourself, you have a secretary, your nurse MA pick up, they still have to report back to us and then to make a decision, right? Mm-hmm. And then while you're constantly interrupted, there's steady variation between shift tasking, right? When people multitasking, multiple browsers switch back and forth, that takes minimum 8 seconds. But if you actually have a whole event being interrupted, it sometimes can take up to 28 minutes to get yourself back to that state, right? Whatever you were doing, because our mind, guess what, are constantly going, right? And constantly have all multiple thoughts. And majority of the thought, actually studies show 80% of the thoughts were from previous day and previous event. So we never really allow ourselves to have that fresh start unless train our brain to do that. So if we constantly being bombarded with decisions, thoughts, then how can you actually be so accurate to say, I need to do this, I only focus on this, therefore I already done it, instead of being pulled by multiple directions.
And that kind of rolls into a question I was going to have. So you talked about burnout. Right now with the pandemic and COVID and things like that, I think burnout is at all-time high for physicians, if I had to guess. From your standpoint, we talk about it, but you actually have like a game plan, a way like how to fight this and go across that. Talk more about that, like actual action steps that people can start taking that helps them get away from the burnout itself.
Yeah, I just believe it's not really about burnout. There's so many amazing people, psychologists, doctors are treating burnout and preventing burnout. What I believe is a time management issue and really a leadership issue. That how do we see ourselves to gain the personal efficiency and then focus on practice efficiency? Because at the end of the day, all of us like to be recognized, be appreciated, and going to the next level where we want to be and truly need to be, and not being stuck at wherever that is. Just because we can figure out a way that we can feel better, but that feeling better part is so brief. Earlier on, I was talking on a podcast about event marketing, right? And then if you think about how do you connect with people, either new or existing, and when we are so goal-oriented, focused, then we feel when we ask people, once you achieve that one goal, how do you feel, right? People might say happiness, joy, peace of release, whatnot. But what they are actually feeling, that piece of joy, is so short-lasted, right? Of hundreds of people I spoken to, whether it's a conference or individual, I always ask this one, and I would love for you guys to even think, the very last time that you feel really awesome, right? Like just something happens, great, awesome. How long did that last? Is that
not even a week?
Yeah, maybe a day.
We had it's so amazing, Sabrina, that you brought this up. We hit a major milestone in our business Q4 of last year.
Yeah, we did.
And we celebrated it and we made a big deal about it internally. We celebrated all the work we put in. And then it's like immediately after we finished the celebration, it's like, well, okay, we did it. What's next?
What'd you say what an accomplished goal does? or like the most.
Oh gosh, I wish I could remember that quote now.
But it was like the most demotivating things.
It is. Hitting a goal stops progress.
Yeah, like check the box. Now what?
Right.
Exactly, because our natural tendency is like, ooh, it's exciting to check box, right? Just like when you thinking, I don't like people to make to-do lists because it's endless. They never get through them.
Yeah.
But it feels good when you're like, tick the box. So some people would do is like they finish something and then they write it down just so they can click the box, right? And then it's like, okay, I can move on to the next thing now, right? Like I rewarded myself, but it's actually you only rewarded for that 2 seconds of checking box, but not really feeling the accomplishment of I did it, right? That's two very different things. And also joy is something very internal, very short lasting. It's excitement, yet joy. But true happiness is something you had to sustain it, right? That's a peace part, that's like fulfillment part. So when we're thinking about not having chaos, it's about the 6 fundamental, I would say. Number 1 is how do we redefine desire? Number 2, how do you generate endless momentum so you're not always a starter but finisher? Number 3, mastering your psychology, that you're be okay and honest about your personal tendencies. We say there are 10 sabotaging tendencies from a positive intelligence standpoint, and be okay to say, oh yeah, I have these. But once I recognize, I can call them out, I can shut them down. But if I don't recognize that, I fester out, then it's what we usually do. Oh shoot, I should have said that. That could be done differently, right? But then it's the hours, days later, then you start criticizing yourself even more. And never get into that sage part, right? The empowerment part of brain. Number 4 is understanding that everyone is different, and we want to figure out our uniqueness, both from inner strength, our natural energy cycle, and understand that there are only 2 to 3 hours in a day that are peak performance hours. Yeah. Most people waste them. They have no idea when they are. And if you actually focus those peak hours in your peak performance hours, you have at least 3 times more productive than any other day, right, in your cycle. That's based on sleep pattern, your activity, whatnot. And also you can train yourself to boost this energy within 2 to 5 minutes from various activities, mindfulness and whatnot. And then it's about, okay, so if we know where we need to go, how to consistently go there, remove my psychological profiling from stopping myself, and I'm at the best energy level that I can have. That is what I love this sentence. And 4 Seasons says, systemize all the predictable so you can humanize the excellence. So what that means, how do we create that simple system? And now I use what's called Freedom Compass. And the compass really have 4 quadrants. And the desire zone, distraction, disinterest, and the joyful zone. The joyful zone makes us feel like, darn it, it's just my obligation. It makes me feel discouraged. I don't want to do it, but it feels like I still have to, right? And the desire zone is really the part we need to spend 80% of the time. But most people don't, because they feel like I couldn't, right? But the couldn't is just a thought that we created in our mind. Again, it's our judger. And our judger, I make everybody create a name for their judge, right? Because we constantly judge ourselves other. So mine is the itty bitty shitty committee, right? My choir is always chiming at me, and I'm like, take a break, right? Awesome. But if I can call that out, right? Someone, a client would say like Dr. Tony's emesis, or someone that they don't like, they're like, oh, I'm gonna say that's the Christina chiming at me, right? Like, so whatever name that you can create, and knowing it's just a persona that you created, it's not your true self. You can take control of how you change your attitude behavior. And then it's understanding what's truly in that desire zone, and what are the things that cause and are the distraction, disinterest, and driveful. So then we can focus, right? Now you have a compass. Now with the compass, what do you do next is called the focus funnel. So that means, how do you delete, get rid of things that are not producing your result, or very low result with a lot of effort, right? That's the opposite of what we want. And number 2 is delegate. Now, when we delegate, then we have to understand our tendency of not pleasing other people when we're delegating, not over controlling, not have the stickler of being perfect all the time, not feeling like, oh, if I don't say it, maybe they'll figure out and then problem will just go away, right? So like understand all these things when you're delegating. And so truly creating that trust. And also be okay for other people to fail and catch them when they do, so you can create that bond, and then they can really truly want to learn instead of feel beat down and judged themselves. And then after that is delay. So that means if this task will produce your time, produce your result in the future, then yes, of course you have to concentrate do it now. But if it's not, even extra 5 minutes is robbing your time. Right. So when you put into a focus funnel, then you realize, oh, that's simple. I only have 4 choices instead of 10,000 choices to make. And then lastly is about how do you be a talent magnet, right? We know not all A players should be in the room together. They're not going to create synergy. So how do you be a beacon that people want to come to you because you are you, and it stand out so much that even between when you are creating team, attracting patients, colleagues, referrals, what do you say? How do you say it? How do you listen strategically, not just listening, that people wanted to be with you and actually want to work? Because the biggest misconception is we have to motivate our team. No, people needed to have an innate wanting to be in the same mission together. It's not about motivating them, but figuring out what are their basic human needs. How do they like to be appreciated? What are their drive, their talents? So then you can highlight those so they also work in their own desire zone without you having to figure out everything.
Man, I don't think I've taken this many notes in an interview in a while, if ever. And that was the fastest 25 minutes episode we've ever seen. That was fantastic.
Sabrina, you've dropped so much value on the podcast today.
We're almost speechless. That was amazing.
Very impressive. But here's the cool thing is that we have a whole audience of people who are not delegating well. They're not working in their strengths. They're not attracting the right type of talent, or they have all A players and they're fighting like cats and dogs. And you have a system called the Laser Focus Advisory Program. And I would love for you to take a few minutes and talk about that and how they can access that.
Yeah, so I think people come to me either they're like, gung ho, let's do this. You fix me everything, right? Like you just do all the diagnostic and like work on it. I'm like, fine, when you're ready in that state, you can do my master program. That's 2 months. But a lot more people are more like, hey, I just needed your help whenever I need it, right? I want to get my time focused decision within like short duration. And that's why we do laser focus 15 minutes. And that's like unlimited year-long support. And because that's the core back in your corner, you're keeping yourself accountable while I'm being your mental fitness support for the whole year. Whenever you need something, you call me. And you also get unlimited voice and message support as well. Now, if at some point that you need more support, happy to go from other, but most people want I'm not sure how to talk to this new onboarding person. They've been with me for 3 months. It doesn't seem like they're hitting their marks, right? Like, how do I have that conversation? Or the time, hey, I have 2 projects. This seems to be great. Should I implement it? How do I make all the decision?
That's so good.
Yeah.
So how can we point people in the direction to go find out more about this? Because I know that you offer online learning, one-on-one advisories, virtual summits, in-person workshops, accountability, mastermind retreats, all the things. But if they just want to learn more about how they can get 10 hours a week, that's 40 hours a month. That's a whole week of your life back a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Work week, for example. How can we put them in the right direction? Where do they need to go?
yeah, they can, for the full focus, they can visit sabrinarunbeck.com/focus. Otherwise, if you wanted to have a quick chat to see if what type of level of support that you need, maybe you don't even know, right? You just like, I'm doing really well, but how do I get into the next level? Happy to have a quick conversation, and just go to my Calendly, calendly.com/Sabrina Runbeck.
And we'll put that in the description on the podcast itself. So make sure people have an easy way to click to go. But yeah, what y'all heard there was sabrinarunbeck.com/focus, and your Calendly as well, which means if it's Calendly, that's a real direct link to your calendar. So you can actually talk to her. So don't be afraid. But that's awesome. I love it.
Sabrina, we have had an outstanding time meeting with you today. I hope this isn't the only time we get a chance to meet. Maybe there's some opportunities in the future for us to work together on podcasts. I would love to have you back on ours for sure. Thank you for taking time out and talking to our audience.
Absolutely. It's been fantastic. Like I said, this is probably one of the most note intensive interviews we've had. So I love it. Absolutely love it. This is one of them I'm going to have to rewind a few times.
Yeah, that's right. And clinic owners, patient providers, listen, what you do matters. All right. Find a way to get some of that time back in your calendar so that you don't burn out, so that you can manage your time, so that you can continue to make an impact on your community.
You're humans too. You need care too. So,
all right. With that, we're going to wrap it up. Sabrina, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, guys.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.